Hello, y'all. We're excited about this episode of Tell Me More. We are talking all about taking the gospel to the people, embodying the gospel, etc. I'm trying to do everything but use the word mission because we want to reframe all of it. So Luke preached a great sermon. He's here to talk about it. And we have our good friend, Ashley Berryhill, with us to provide her insight on just the global world. And it's a great conversation. We're really excited for it, and we're glad you're listening. All right, we're in the studio. It is Monday morning. It is 11. I'm excited. It feels very disorienting in this moment.
It does.
Because if you're watching, we're all just sitting in the wrong spots. And Ashley's waving. So our guest today is not really a guest. You've been here
a couple of
You're
times.
somewhat of like a recurring character.
I am a
character. This was a sitcom. Ayo. Our friend Ashley Berryhill, Director of Global Engagement, is here in the studio with us. Luke, you preached yesterday.
I did, so I'm in the wrong chair.
You're in the preacher seat.
I am.
You're in the right chair.
I am in the right chair. It feels wrong.
It feels wrong, yeah. And Ashley insisted to be in that seat over there,
Yeah.
which is usually my seat.
Sorry. Thank you.
We're nothing if not creatures of habit.
Thank you for your discomfort in this podcast.
I feel persecuted in this moment. Just kidding. We were just talking
Ashley is
about how that's
teaching
not
on Philippians
it. Yeah,
this week.
That's it. Okay.
So this is
And we'll get to
what's
that.
in the water.
So what I thought would be enjoyable for all, I'll speak for myself, is Ashley, we just haven't had you in here. I don't know. Do you remember the last time you were in the podcast studio with us? It's been a while.
I think it was Missions Month, Engagement
Yeah,
Month.
that makes sense. So late November. So what's been going on in your life since then? How's your family?
Yeah,
How's
yeah.
your world? I mean, just quick updates.
Yeah, quick updates. Family's good. My husband, Jason, is traveling all the time. And so I think
does
this
travel a
summer,
lot, yeah.
we were able to take a family vacation and tied with the Baptist World Alliance Congress in Australia. And before then, we were able to go to Indonesia. Fun fact, lived there for many, many years. My son was born there. And so this was his first time back since we moved here to the States. So he was 4 when we moved.
Gosh, was he really?
back.
I mean,
Yeah.
because I knew you then. Yeah.
And so now he's 12. And so, I had all these romantic ideas of how he would embrace where he was born and raised in the preschool age. And yeah, those were out the window pretty quickly.
He didn't.
He didn't
boys.
care.
He didn't care. He was like,
boys.
this doesn't mean anything to me. Is that fair? But you wanted to take him back to where he was born.
It meant something to you.
It meant something to me. So it was good. So we got pictures. I guess that will save us for memories for years to come.
Sure. You're like, we don't need to go back to that anytime soon. How long did y'all live in Indonesia?
7 years.
Okay. As a family.
5.5 years as a famally.
And then you had 2 years on your
yes,
own, right?
Yes. Yes.
Very, very cool. Very intense. Anything about your family vacation that was particularly, you already said what was unmet
Well, I think
expectations.
some
How about
interesting things. We went there because Jason had some work in the region over there. And so we went to Bali, which Bali is an island in Indonesia. We used to live on Java, but we decided to go out more east and see Komodo region.
Like the dragon?
Yes, we saw the Komodo dragon. Went
In
to the
its
Komodo
natural-
National Park.
Very cool.
And saw that. But I think an interesting point is that the volcano on that island in the island that we would fly in and out of, decided to erupt a few weeks before we left, and then the day after we landed in Australia. So it's just
This is what
odd.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. So that was enjoyable? You had a good time with your family?
We had a great time. It's a great place to go snorkeling and diving and just be with the people. Yeah.
And then Harrison did the teen program at BWA.
Yeah, let's talk
did.
that.
Which I don't think most people realize they do like a children's and teens program because people bring their
whole family.
families.
Yeah.
So he did the teen program.
He loved it. It was just a fabulous thing for him. I think the Queensland,
Queensland Baptist
Thank you.
sponsored it, I think.
yes, and they had their youth pastors in there and all their interns, and it was just really
well done?
good. He wanted to go back every day. He even stayed one time during a whole lunch period with them.
That's a big vote of
Had fish
confidence
and-
for a 12-year-old.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. They had fish and chips and did all the stuff. And, I think I got to meet one of the youth pastors that was heading it and just was really drawn to him, just the aroma of Christ around him. I mean, it was just refreshing and really good.
And that's just the kids program.
The teen program.
Excuse me. That's just the teen program.
Yes.
What did you think about the whole program? The big boy.
Do we want to get into that?
I want you to give like a 2-minute.
Okay. It was amazing.
Amen.
The power of God, the Spirit of God is very much alive and active around the world. I would say also, I think Luke would affirm this, the Oceania is what you would say. I'd said Aussie, but you said Oceania.
Yeah, it extends past Australia.
Yeah, the Spirit is fresh. And so just this fresh wind among them is really amazing just to be around, and just a prayer that I've had coming back to, Lord, bring your Spirit here in that same way. I think my time also was really spent with multiple other representatives from various countries, particularly those that have had persecution and are, in the Middle East right now. And so had lots of good conversations and connections with them, and really talking to our friend, Wissam Al-Salibi, if I said that right. I'm sorry, Wissam, if I said I didn't say that right. But 21 Wilberforce,
You've become friends with him.
Yeah. He knows what he's doing. I trust him very much.
Which is a Ashley Berryhill compliment in the missions world.
It is.
Yeah. And so what's his shtick? I don't think we've talked in here about 21 Wilberforce. Again, we don't want to give this whole episode to it, because we just sense that when Dr. Wiles goes back, we're going to have his own, next week we'll probably do that. And so we want to tease it, and I certainly want to hear your perspective on it. But
I think there's a lot of things going on with BWA that we have different.
Yeah. They do a lot of things.
Yeah. So I think from my perspective, from my perspective, I'm probably going to talk about the persecution and the persecuted church. BWA, 21 Wilberforce is like the BWA advocacy arm for the persecuted church. And the majority of world pastors there, we're always asking, they want to be empowered. They want to have help in terms of what does it mean to advocate for themselves.
So 21 Wilberforce helps national Christians develop their own kind of ways of legally representing themselves within their own governments to basically fight persecution at a legal level.
Correct. And I would say they also do it at the UN level too.
A lot of advocacy work there.
And ambassadors, they'll speak with ambassadors on their behalf. And so there's a lot of advocacy work and quiet work behind the scenes. And we've just got someone leading it who is very competent, very highly credited, I think, in experience in this, and he's doing a really good job. He is Lebanese, so he doesn't come from an American background, and so I think that's where the American church needs to have some grace to learn from him and to give him the opportunity to develop those relationships, because he really does know what he's doing. But the church, the persecuted church, needs help, and so they have more than 5 years worth of work already lined up, but they just need the funding to help them get that done. And so that's one of the things that the American or the Western church can provide in this conversation.
It's a resource.
Right. Yes.
We had, when we were with our Cuban friend at the Ascent Women's Gathering, she said something like, you have resources, but we have revival. Is that how she worded that?
Yeah, she did.
And that
said,
this is the exchange that we can have for each other. And I thought that's a good, succinct way of helping me understand what y'all call polycentric mission.
Yes.
Which is this mutual exchange of what we can
all
bring
there
to
are
the
multiple
table.
Centers sending to and from each other. That's what polycentric means.
Yeah, I think it's a very healthy model. I'm excited that we're kind of dipping our not dipping our toes. We're trying to do that.
We're diving in.
That. Well, and I think there have been signs of life in that way for a long time.
Yes.
But to kind of name it and move toward it is really fun. So that's great. Yeah. Good.
So thank you for letting me talk about it.
That's Ashley. What are you doing this summer? You watching anything? How are you spending your time?
Well, traveling, getting ready for the fall at work, you mean, or just?
Yeah, no, just what's Ashley Berryhill up to?
Vegging out on some Netflix.
This is what I'm asking. Yeah. I know you're working hard. Ashley does work extremely hard, actually.
She does.
So I'm glad to hear that you're vegging out on Netflix. Anything that you can say out loud in a church podcast? Or
Well, I never saw Grey's Anatomy. I would say it's not a very wholesome show.
No, but it's widespread. It's culturally influential.
So, it's interesting.
What season are you
I feel
on?
like I could be a doctor now. I'm thinking why didn't I become a surgeon? This would be fun.
You could have been.
So
would it be fun?
I don't know.
No, I think
the fast pace of trauma and leadership, I think I would have
well in that.
thrived in that.
But that's actually what you do most days here.
That's true.
Is the fast pace of trauma and leadership with our global centers, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's your skill set's not wasted. Let me just remind you of that.
Yeah. It's much more. Never mind.
Yeah,
I'm not
it
gonna
is,
say
yeah.
that.
We actually can't say that on the podcast. So, very good. Well, let's take this moment to just recognize where we are in the year and what we're gearing up for. And as we always joke, this podcast is sponsored by First Baptist Arlington. So, let's let the church know what's going on around here.
This coming Sunday, the first Sunday of August.
Wow. Okay, let's pause right there. This coming Sunday is the first Sunday of August.
It is the first Sunday in August. We're here.
I can't keep up.
It's August 3rd
Oh
this
my
Sunday.
gosh.
So Dr. Wiles is back.
Yeah.
Woo.
We're excited for that.
It's big enough for big church. So pre-Kers are going into worship
This Sunday.
this coming
No,
Sunday.
I think this Sunday they get their bag.
bag.
Or
Oh, did they get their bag?
I think it's next Sunday.
Next Sunday.
Because next
I'm
Sunday
wrong.
is Fresh Start,
That's it.
Okay, that
which
makes
is where
sense.
everybody
Yes.
promotes.
So big enough for big church is happening. They get their bags.
Yeah, so if you have an incoming kindergartner,
Incoming pre-Care.
okay, if they're like 4-ish, then big enough for big church is happening.
Yep.
So
and then
make
I
sure
think
you're
First
in
at
the loop on
First
that.
is happening.
Yeah.
Is Merge?
Merge is
Merge
happening
weekend.
this weekend.
Merge will be done by Sunday. Merge is
Yeah,
Friday
my
night and
son's gonna be
Saturday.
in there.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
Chelsea and Tanner have been
Sixth
gearing up for
graders
that.
going up into the youth ministry.
Yes, it's happening. To Sunday night is a teacher training. So if you lead in an education department, then likely you've gotten a flyer about a teacher
Yep.
appreciation lunch. That's actually the flyer says Saturday. So if anybody's listening, it's Sunday, August
Sunday.
3rd
Please
in
come.
the evening.
It'll be good.
Yeah, I'll be there because we're going to try to help them know about the care ministries as well.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I think so. So that's just in the next week.
Yeah.
Then August 10, if you're looking for a Bible study, August 10 would be a really it's a fresh start for everyone. Obviously the kids all move up a grade. It's a little different in adult, but it is still, we all kind of gear up, take a breath, and then it's a new school year. So you've got all the kids promoting, which means the parents are here likely and trying classes. And so great time to kind of get plugged in and get rolling with that. School starts when?
The 13th.
Yeah, I mean, that's not far away.
It's coming.
It's coming. And then all our midweek stuff, all our Wednesday night starts after Labor Day.
Yeah,
So
in September.
The 3rd of September. So let me give a little recap. July stuff is still going strong. Actually, this week, we've still got women's clusters meeting this week and next week. They go into the first week of August. Ashley, you're teaching Pastor's Bible Study tomorrow or Wednesday, July.
Wednesday. Yes.
I skipped a day.
Yeah.
You're like, I need that day. The Wednesday Pastor's Bible Study you're teaching, we're finishing Philippians, which has been really fun with all these different voices. It's a
Yes.
great book, but also
It is a beautiful end of a letter.
so
Yes.
if you have a chance to have lunch at the church on Wednesday and hear Ashley kind of recap or put a bow on the end of Philippians, do that. And then all our July preachers have been terrific, and that's a great segue for what we're about to talk about. But there's a lot going on. July's wrapping up. There's still a lot. But, I mean, gear up, take a break, take one hat off, take your summer hat off and put your fall hat on because we're about to go march into the new year. So it's fun. Have I done it justice?
You
have I
done
let people know
really
what's going
well.
on around
Yes.
here? Okay,
I
good.
think so.
Good. We want y'all to be informed, and I know we always hear we don't know what's going on, and so any avenue we can try to get info in people's ears or hands, then we want to. So, okay,
Okay.
Luke, you preached yesterday.
I did.
Yes,
Preach
Well
the
done.
sermon.
kind
Thank
of an
you.
obscure text. I don't know why they
I've
gave
never
that to
heard that
you.
passage
Yeah.
before.
What was the passage again?
It was Matthew 28, 16 through 20,
Okay.
which we've labeled the Great Commission.
Yes, and when did that label come about?
The 1600s with Baron Justinian van Wells from the Netherlands.
Got it.
But it didn't really stick around until about 200 years later in the 1800s. So,
Why do you think?
well, missions, as we think of it, there's a whole lot of history. We can get super nerdy and technical here.
It's
However you want to
Yeah.
go.
it's tell me more
Tell
for
me
you.
more.
Yeah.
So
well,
tell us whatever you want to tell us, right? And
Yeah,
actually, I
that's
expect
right.
you to chime in as one who has
Yeah.
been a practitioner of mission for.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I want to hear from Luke.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
But whatever piques your interest, dive in.
Yeah.
so for a really long time, mission was like a Catholic concept. So when the Protestant Reformation happens, Protestants don't actually really start to think about mission for about 200 to 300 years. So it takes a while. So if you think Protestant Reformation hits from the 1500s, which really it's a series of reformations and movements, it's not one unified movement of Protestants. But mission was really seen by Protestants as a Catholic thing for at least a couple of hundred years. You get, a few early birds to the movement like Justinian van Wells, who, labels Matthew 28, 18 through 20, the Great Commission. But it takes a couple of hundred years after that Reformation for Protestants to really think, wow, we should actually take the gospel to the whole world. And they were actually fringe movements within the Protestant Reformation. So that really wasn't happening at first within like mainline Lutheran churches. It was radical reformers, like the Moravians, who you may have heard of. They have an influence in Central Texas through like Church of the Brethren. So if you think about those Czech communities in Texas, they're the direct descendants of those movements.
Fun fact.
Fun fact. Ethnic patterns in the U.S. are really like reflective of, like denominational patterns are reflective of migration patterns through immigration waves. So that's why Lutherans live in the north, because Scandinavians and Germans settled there. And that's why we tend to have more English style denominational patterns in the southern part of the United States and maybe up into parts of the Northeast. That's an aside. But missions takes a while. And so the Moravians, for example, are this group that they were really radical reformers and part of the German pietist movement. Dr. Wiles could really correct all this if I'm wrong.
I'm sure he'll listen with a fine-tooth comb.
He will.
And come back with edits.
But like the Moravians are these people who like
He's more generous
are
than
on
that.
ships. They've completely sold out to Jesus. They're not afraid of death. They had this very spiritual awakening. Most of the early Protestant missions movements were very spirit driven. So they would have had, I think, what we would now label as like a charismatic renewal. So an emphasis on the Holy Spirit.
Okay.
So like one of these groups, the Moravians, they're on a boat sailing to the United States, and a man named John Wesley happens to be on that ship at the time. He's an Anglican minister. All the Anglicans are afraid of dying as they like are in the storm in the Atlantic, and the Moravians are just completely content because they're not afraid of death because Jesus. And John Wesley actually sees this, and that's what sparks the Methodist movement in John Wesley. That's kind of his turning point in life, one of his turning points. So early Protestant missions movement has a big emphasis in kind of these grass level, kind of low church groups. Then it becomes more organized through the 1800s, and that's when we hit what some people would label like the modern missions movement. And it's really in the modern missions movement that this phrase, Great Commission, takes off as a missions passage. And really prior to the 1600s, no one is reading the end of Matthew and thinking missions. It is a completely separate, like they haven't applied that label to Matthew 28 at all. You can't find it anywhere in Scripture. You could go pick up a Bible commentary in our church commentary library, and
which is great.
Very few of them are actually going to talk about it as the Great Commission.
Okay.
And so that moves forward, and that's when you start to see in the 1800s with the modern missions movement, you see the development of mission agencies, and that's when you actually start to see this fracture between ecclesiology and missiology. So mission moves out of the church, and you start to see a break from missions and church. So,
But this is just from a Western
this is from a
standpoint.
Western perspective. I'm talking Western
good.
Christianity,
Good.
particularly like European and North American perspectives. And so it's in North America and Europe that these missions groups, these agencies form. They break off from the church. Some of that's done for like organizational efficiency, which are these new ideas in the 1800s. No one's talking about organizational efficiency in like the year 1500. Right. And so they break and they separate. And really, we've lived in that separation of church and mission for a really long time. And so one of the things that as I was thinking through this passage, praying through this passage, I want the church and mission to re-engage. Because I think for most people, when they've heard the Great Commission taught, it's not been a passage that's actually for them or about them. It's for missionaries. It's for people who feel called to move overseas specifically. And it's not about them, and there's nothing for them to do in the context of the Great Commission.
I think it's been a pretty good marketing campaign per se for I think mission agencies. I think the ecclesiology, though, of understanding what the local church and what the emphasizing local church is starting to come back from mission agencies and really connecting to the local church because they're understanding ecclesiology better. But I think,
church and mission are recombining.
Yeah, they are. And fascinating because I was with a group of people this last week that I grew up with, mentors. They were Church of Christ.
Yeah, but where were you?
Yeah, baseball game. I was at the Ranger game.
Yeah, because I'm like, you were in town. Yeah. And so, they're not in town. So, okay.
One of the things that I told them was, especially one of them was a missionary, and they had been missionaries in Russia and the Slavics and in East Asia, and now they're teaching at Harding. And again, Church of Christ theology is very different than Baptist, and I'm a Baptist through and through.
Okay, we hear it.
But
you're right.
I would say,
With that said,
I encourage them because I learned ecclesiology mainly through them and how they participated with each other as a church and on mission together. So it's interesting because they don't have a missions agency that they push everybody out to. It's the church that sends, and very much more New Testament first, early church.
Yeah.
and I think about what we might have inherited at like a First Baptist Arlington setting, even though I didn't grow up Baptist, but I know enough just from joining at 18. But, we kind of did have this Southern Baptist.
The mission board.
Yeah, and I was going to use the word.
The Foreign Mission Board.
Right, I was going to use the word machine, but that's not fair because that sounds really lifeless. And
But it's an organization.
But I don't think anyone
Cooperative.
It is, but it does operate very mechanically in the sense that it's very systematized.
Very
and if
pipeline.
you have someone in your church that feels quote unquote called to missions, you kind of exported them to the IMB.
Yeah, you turn them over to it.
Right, and then they would help vet them, send them, put them on the, you know what I mean? And so it is an exporting of mission. Does that make sense? And even we can be guilty of that here. As Mission Arlington grew up, I think sometimes we were really proud of them, but there became like some of our boomers are still really involved in it because they
Yes.
helped build it. But the next generation is like we kind of exported our local mission even to the very good work of Mission Arlington, but that we weren't necessarily hands-on with. We were just financing at some level, and still are, and that's a good thing for the community. So it's not the fault of Mission Arlington that we did that. I don't mean it like that, but we can default to supporting financially without like actually the Spirit of God.
And I would call that just
transforming
the
our life.
outsourcing of mission from the church. And that's what I think, seeing this fracture, and I think the only person who grew up Baptist on this podcast.
Nope, we just said it. So yeah,
There we go.
you're it.
I was a Quaker for 3 years, so.
Were you though?
Yeah, ish.
Yeah.
I taught Quakerism for 3 years. But seeing this fracture between church and mission and this separation, and it's not healthy for either. The purpose of the church is to be the ambassadorial presence of Christ on earth. Like, that's it. It's not to consume religious goods and services. It's not even really to gather. The gathering is important, but it's not the point.
So that was your question from Connor last week,
Yeah.
and you said you'd address it this week.
Okay, repeat the question for me because I've slept since
I think
then.
Connor made a statement that said, "Is that correct, Luke? What do you think?" So I want to make sure I'm quoting him correctly. But it was something like, the church is really more for like the building up of the body so that they can then go out and be missional. So like, I think it was against like a seeker sensitive and more about like, we were talking about Jesus returning in a way we don't talk about it. And he was like, basically saying like, don't worry about what the outsider is going to feel and think in a service. Let that be kind of deeper, and because it's for us. And then he said, Luke, what do you think about that? And you said, I'll talk about it next week. So
Okay,
I think I've gotten the context correct. And if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, Connor. Yeah.
So we apologize.
Yeah.
I think the first thing we have to address is, and this is part of this separation of church and mission, like it's left us with a really flimsy ecclesiology. And so and really what that boils down to is, how do you answer the question, what is the church? Which is, on the surface, it seems like a simple question, but it's honestly, I think, one of the most important theological questions we can ask is, what is the church? What is it? And I think we're all pretty confident in saying it's not the building. We grew up hearing that the church isn't the building, but it's also not an event.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of Dr. Wiles. He's defined it as, it's a purposeful gathering? Is that the word he uses? Because he's used a phrase.
It sounds right.
Of people on mission, on Jesus' mission or something like that.
Yeah, it's God's people. It's the called out people of God, the people who've chosen to live together in his kingdom. And so you have the church with like a capital C, which would be the universal church. So like
all the believers.
The Protestant reformers would talk about this as the invisible church. It's the church across time and space, the mystical union of us being one in Christ. But then you have the local lowercase c church, which is this local body of people who have come together to unite around the cause of Christ. And that's to live a life as he is calling us to do, to be obedient unto him and to live in his kingdom. And so it's not an event. So we are the church when we gather for worship on Sunday morning, but the event itself is not the church. The church is the people. We continue to be the church even when we're not gathered singing and listening to a sermon. And so when we leave that space, when we go back to our places, we still continue to be God's people, called and united together in this mystical way. And that's living life on purpose. I think Dr. Wiles' title for the sermon was Disciples on Mission. I think I just called it Teaching, Discipling. I'm not a good labeler of things.
Yeah, when I was at Dayspring, Eric Howell was the pastor and still is the pastor. And every sermon, at least when I was there, because we have a bulletin, and so it always needed a title, and he would always title it A Sermon for Dayspring. That was his title.
I love that.
Because I never asked him about it. I just assumed he's not big on like gimmicky titles. That's just his way. That represents him. He's very pragmatic in those ways. But
it's also very deep because it's talking about this is a word of God. About God and from God for
it's really
you
like that
as
moment.
a people.
Yeah. This is a sermon for y'all in this moment. Yeah. So it does say something, doesn't it?
It
And that would
does.
be very Reverend Dr. Eric Howell-esque. So hi, Eric. You'll never see this, but Dayspring, if you're in Waco, if you're ever in Waco on a Sunday morning, Dayspring Baptist Church is a very lovely, unique, refreshing.
Yeah, you love it.
I
You
love
talk
it.
highly of it.
It's a great little church. It formed me. So, you're always biased on it. Yeah. So
I think one definition I've heard, and I continue to kind of work out of and operate, is the church is a community of practices. So it is a community. It's a group of people who are united by a common set of practices. And so you could, I think, have different discussions about what those practices are. And they would take us, I think, pretty far afield for today. But that's the definition I've kind of been working with and operating with. That the church is a community, first and foremost. It's a people, but it's a community of practices. And so I think getting away from thinking of church as a building you go to, or even church as an event you attend, is a really important thing. Because
So
if
how
church
do
is an
you-
event you attend,
Right.
then what's different between that and me going to a worship concert?
So the Sunday morning experience, what would you call that?
It's the gathering of God's people.
So when you go to the gathering of God's people, like this is Connor's question. When you go to the gathering of God's people, what's the purpose for that?
To send you out, to
So
form
it's-
you, shape you, and send you.
So it's for God's people to be formed, shaped, and sent. Is that what you'd say?
I would.
So to answer Connor's question last week,
I'm not a seeker-sensitive model person, which I don't think surprises anybody.
yeah, and Connor wouldn't be either. I think his sense of things, I'm trying to represent him to kind of
Yeah, I think you're doing a good job.
Yeah. So the church service, can I call it that?
Yeah,
the
I think that's- I mean,
well, we need a name for it.
we need a name.
You can't talk about what it's not and eventually
Right.
not talk about what it is. It's
Call
a
it a
worship
church
service.
It's a worship service. I'm fine with that.
Okay.
But recognize that what you call a worship service is a culturally set and defined thing, and it looks different in different cultural environments. And so there are gatherings of God's people that we would never label a worship service, but are the church because it's a community of practices. So like underground church movements, house church movements that replicate extremely quickly typically aren't going to sing because it would be dangerous to make that much noise. They may not even have a sermon. It may just be a reading of God's word and maybe
Correct.
some group discussion around that word. But that's still church. And so don't confuse
The church doesn't
And
have
they
to
pray.
look
your
like...
cultural comprehension for what the worship gathering is universal.
Yeah. You were nodding. You want to say more
Oh
about
yeah,
that?
no, I totally agree, and I would say they would also pray. So sometimes,
they would pray.
sometimes those look like your reading of the scripture, whatever text that they do have, and then just praying together, and bearing each other's burdens. So I mean,
So do you think those,
Quite
and
simple.
really this is kind of an ecclesiology question, I'm taking it a little bit upstream. Do you think those gatherings of the reading of scripture and praying together, in there, if there are no other elements involved, would those be church? Do you get what I'm getting at?
Yep, because it's God's people.
What needs to be present to make something church?
The people of God united by the Spirit of God, living on purpose in the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
pretty simple.
So without ever taking the Lord's Supper or
Well, I
having
think that's in
baptisms,
there, but
I mean
that's all in there.
Yeah.
The question is, how frequently? What does that look like? Or have they been taught the Lord's Supper and what that means? Do they have the means to get that? You know, it probably looks different in different contexts.
Because
as
there are
well.
some churches that would say, we're actually not the church 3 Sundays out of 4 because we don't do the Lord's Supper every week.
every time we gather.
And so there are some groups that would say this is a defining marker of one of these practices that the community of God does. And so if you're not doing that,
Yeah.
Or they eat together around a table.
And that would be considered the breaking of the bread.
The breaking of the bread together.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. I think I'm just testing the bounds of like, because we have done some of this in like all the mini cohorts that I've been a part of at First Baptist Arlington with like outside sources, and they try to get you to strip down to like what makes church church.
Yeah.
And I think that's my curiosity of, and I understand what that could look like here in this quote unquote free society, but like I'm trying to imagine kind of the contextualization of it somewhere else.
Well, and if you want to like read through some people who've really tried to work through these contextualization questions, like there's some fairly accessible Japanese theologians. That sounds like a weird sentence.
Because it is.
It is a weird
Yeah.
sentence.
I mean, it's good. It's all right.
they're good.
Yeah.
But there's like a short little book called God is Rice by Masao, Masao Takanaka.
I hope the Kavanaughs are listening.
So God is Rice
We'll order it for you.
by Masao Takanaka
Yeah.
is a short little book. It's going to like push the bounds of what you think about when you think about contextualization.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. Like some non-Western voices would be really helpful. for
They
this,
are.
Right.
I spent some time with the New Zealand Baptists last week, and so as they're
Tell us more.
Oh man, it was fascinating. So when British missionaries originally arrived in New Zealand, the Maori people actually like pretty readily responded to the gospel. They actually like read the Gospel of Luke and were like, okay, let's go live it. And then
Wow.
they went and like took it down the island, but did it in a very like Maori way. And the British missionaries were like, no, you're doing it wrong. You're supposed to do it in a building and do it with these
Right.
things. And so
Yeah.
the British missionaries couldn't contextualize it. The Maori people took it, ran with it, and lived it
In their own way.
in their own way,
Yeah.
which is,
What
as
the
we know
gospel
now,
does.
Right.
is the ideal. So
This is what we want.
and then there's a treaty
Yes.
made between the Crown and the Maori people that lasted for about 10 years, and then the British broke it. And so New Zealand
Brits aren't looking good in this one. I'm just going to name it.
well, missions history is mostly a bunch
bit
of
fraught.
sad stories.
Yeah, it's a bit fraught. Let's just
There's
name
some
it.
goodness in it.
There's
though.
some goodness.
Yeah.
Good job, Ashley.
The gospel, and
The Moravians are a
yeah,
great
the
example.
gospel is good seed.
Yeah.
And missions history is really just a testament to how good the seed is.
It's good.
In spite
Say
of our
that again?
brokenness. Missions history is mostly just a testimony to how good the seed is despite our brokenness.
Let's quote
'Cause
that.
colonialism was
Say it
bad,
again. Say it again.
but the gospel was so good.
Yeah.
You know, I remember a story, I think it's from Dr. Wiles, that it talked about British missionaries, or Western missionaries. I don't know if they were British. I'll take the hands off of the British missionaries. In Africa somewhere, where the service, they planted a church, but it was a very Western-looking church. In the service, they would sing hymns. And then basically once they got through what they thought they had to do, they'd like sing the Western hymns, they'd put it away, and then they would sing songs they've written in their own heart language, and it would just explode with life. Like the sanctuary would explode with life and dancing and color. And it was a good example of like, we think that we have to do it this way because this is what, you know, the outsiders taught us. But when we actually make it our own, there's just so much joy and spirit and life. And that's good. And I think that's an old story of an old paradigm. I think most, at least what we're involved in, is totally different. But I think
That's
we've
not
learned,
how we or our partners are operating today.
totally. Like we can be very proud of what we're doing internationally because we're just, I think the people I know that we're working with have a very humble posture, or our national leaders. They grew
Yes.
up there
Yep.
and they look like they are them and them. I hate to say us and them, but you know what I mean? And that's a much healthier way. And shame on us if we ever thought
But
that we were
I would
the
say
ones
some of the
leading.
conversation at BWA was also, you didn't finish your New Zealand though.
Oh, did I not?
Oh, about
Okay.
about the gospel spreading.
About,
Yeah,
he
New Zealand
did.
Baptists are
Okay.
now really working. So they made that treaty, I think, in 1830 between like Queen Victoria and the Maori people. It lasted for about 10 years. This is from what I've learned. And then basically the treaty was about like land. The Maori gave like the entire province of Auckland to the British, and we're like, have this, it's yours. And then let it, we'll keep living on our land. And then the British just like pushed through 10 years later and took over the whole 2 islands. But now New Zealand Baptists are in this work of like, how do we actually honor this treaty that was made by Christian missionaries to the Maori people on behalf of the Crown of England, and really live into it because it was a good document. And so what does it look like for us to re-engage the Maori people based on how they originally received the gospel, and to help contextualize it afresh in a Maori voice and in Maori language and Maori customs. So really profound and beautiful
Yeah, it's
work
really
happening.
great. Yeah, good. Let's follow that. What were you going to say?
Oh,
No correction.
I was going to talk about a little bit about the global theology, some of the conversation around global theology now instead of just a Western theological lens.
Yeah, say more about that.
But I think some of the conversation right now is we've set up these programs and Southern Baptists have all these theological programs along with the funding with it, including funding for internationals to come over to the West in America and to learn from the seminaries.
These institutions.
Which has been a great thing. It's beautiful. Don't hear me.
It's a privilege
Yes,
to go to seminary.
It is.
Yeah.
So, but the conversation that I've had with some of the people who have gone through that pipeline now, and they're starting to they want to raise up thousands of nationals to go internationally, is about, well, these are the only places that they can go because we don't have enough maybe institutions or seminaries in our own context. We don't have the funding for it, and so they get full rides. And so those are the things that's going to shape how these nationals are going to view theology, but it's going to be shaped through a Western lens instead of their own context. And so the conversation right now is, one, they're seeing those patterns, but two, it's like, okay, because of the polycentric nature of mission now and the church cooperating together, the global church cooperating together, what does it look like to take the theology that the West has provided, but also add the theology of the majority world as well, because we need to learn from that, especially when we're looking at migration and, the kids these days. They say the kids these days have more in common with each other around the world than they do with their grandparents. So the connectivity is there. And so we're going to need to understand not only a Western theology, but we're going to need to understand theology in these other contexts as well.
That's good.
And so that is some of the conversation as well. So, anyway.
Which may sound
Cool.
in defense of that conversation, because I think if there are some listeners out there who are going, well, theology is always the same across time and space.
Okay.
Well, first of all, I'm just anticipating critiques because I think some people think theology
Is theology.
is theology. So theology is not biblical studies. Like, first and foremost, we've been to seminary, you know that there's a difference between these
There's
kind of
two different
academic
classes.
disciplines.
Yeah.
So biblical studies is, let's examine the historical context of this text, understand what it meant to the original readers. Let's basically try to put ourselves back in time, back into this culture, back into this language, back into this framework, so that we can understand what Paul meant in Philippians to the original Philippian church.
Yes.
That's biblical studies. Very important. Theology is then
Vital.
Biblical studies is vital.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, we love it.
Get it right. The first
Vital.
time. Yeah, before you try to apply it to any other culture.
And then
context.
theology is, okay, well, how do we understand that God is three and one? How do we navigate what happens in salvation? And so it's going to draw from the Bible, and then it's going to try and answer those questions using the tools of philosophy and reason and discernment. So theology is kind of combining what we glean from the Bible with how we understand things from philosophy, how we understand things from those frameworks, how we answer questions that Scripture doesn't necessarily spell out entirely for us. The Bible doesn't tell us what exactly it means that God is three and one. We know the Trinity is in the Bible, but it doesn't explain to us how it works. And so theology tries to take that and figure out, well, how does this work? But it does that with a toolkit. And that toolkit comes from the culture that the theologian found themselves in and is answering questions that that theologian's culture was asking about the text. And so I think historically, we've not always understood that theology is always done out of a culture or a context or a place and a time and a framework.
Well said.
But all theology is contextual. It all has a contextual basis. It's all rooted in culture. It's all rooted in philosophy of that culture, the language of that culture. So Martin Luther was a German guy in the 1500s. He thought like a German. He thought based on his influences. And we could say the same thing for any theologian throughout time. They're products of their culture, just like I'm a product of contemporary American culture.
Right. We have a lens.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
And so the call for majority world theology, for global theology, is recognizing that every theologian is doing theology out of their own lens. And one of the ways to move beyond those lenses is to be in conversation with theologians of other contexts, because they're coming with different questions, different preconceived notions, different frameworks, different linguistic tools than we do.
Mm-hmm. And you chip away at what was culture, and then you're left with what's the really good, truth of the gospel.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
It's really beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, we're actually... we need some closing thoughts, and then we need to go.
I was going to ask you a question.
let's do it.
Why don't you round it out? Making, teaching, baptizing.
Making, baptizing, teaching.
There we go. Sorry. Yes.
I think Matthew thought the order mattered.
Okay. He probably did, knowing Matthew. Yes.
What's the question?
Oh, no, I was going to ask you, why don't you end on some of those points? Like,
Oh.
you titled, one
Yeah.
of your titles was
You
focusing on that.
part of that
good.
too was, I think, for so much of the time that we've taught this text, preached this text, read this text, there's been so much emphasis on the word go, particularly when we think of it in Great Commission terms, which again is that later label. We've put all the emphasis and thrust on this word go, and then there's been like a movement in recent years to go, well, it's really as you're going, kind of this, it's a continuous action wherever you're going. But as I was kind of sitting with it, that was not the word that I was drawn to in the text. And I think we've made it the most important verb in that passage, but I don't know that it is. And so as I was sitting with Matthew, thinking about the gospel, really the whole gospel is about Jesus is the anointed king in the line of David. He's the new and greater Moses, and he is God's very presence with us. He's Emmanuel. And that's what the Great Commission is. It's a reaffirmation of Jesus' kingship. So he says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Jesus is the anointed king. He's the Messiah. And then Jesus says, teach them to obey everything I've commanded you. So he reaffirms this Mosaic role that he takes on, but is even better than Moses. And then he puts that ministry of teaching in our hands, which is wild. And then he says, and I'm with you always, even to the very end of the age. So I think when we come to the end of Matthew, if we're going to be good readers, and I think probably this is my lens as someone who studied English literature in college, recognize that this is a work of literature. Matthew's construction of his ending is intentional and on purpose. And what he's doing is he's hitting, here are the things that you've got to know about Jesus. He's the king. He's the new and better Moses, and he is with you. And he's actually charged you with this to carry his ministry forward. So you're going to do it on the basis of his power and his authority. So go and make disciples. Connect them to the living Jesus. And I just loved that image from that article, that I think we get bogged down in what discipleship is or isn't. But really, at the end of the day, it's just connecting people with the living Jesus. Like, I've seen people try to parse out evangelism and discipleship aren't the same thing. Well, that's just fracturing church and mission again. Mm-hmm. It's all just discipleship. But it's all just connecting people to the living Jesus. And then we baptize them. And really that's important because we're connecting them to the family of faith. They are stepping into Jesus' death and resurrection. I think in the Baptist church, we do people a disservice when we say it's just a symbol. And that's why I tried not to say that. I said we're physically acting out a spiritual reality. And we've talked before on the podcast about how what you do in your body matters. That's actually how you deal with your spirit, is through your body. Mm-hmm. I can't directly access my soul. I am a soul, but I primarily do everything through my body, through bodily practice. When I pray, I do it with my brain and with my lips. I do it in my body, and that shapes my soul. So baptism is no different. You do something in your body, you act out a spiritual reality. And then teaching. Jesus has really put everything in our hands. And so if you think through the lens of Matthew, what he's charged all of his followers with is, okay, teach them to live the Sermon on the Mount. If you think of that as like the core of Jesus' teaching in Matthew, it's not the only teaching he does. He does a lot more. Mm-hmm. But just think about it that way. What Jesus is charging you with is teach people to live the Sermon on the Mount. Teach people to obey, not to know, but to obey everything I've commanded you.
Mic drop. I think that was great.
Anything else from you, Ashley?
No.
Okay.
I think that's a great ending.
Okay. Well,
okay.
Thank you, Luke.
Dr. Wiles will be back in this chair that I'm sitting in next week, and I'll be back in my usual spot.
Great. Love it. Thank y'all, and see you next week. Thanks for listening to the Tell Me More podcast today. You can subscribe to this podcast on your app of choice, or you can visit us at fbca.org to find out more information about the podcast and our church. Thanks for listening. Have a good day.